On today's show, Darius Garland is a big reason why the Cavs are 11-0 on the season. Let's talk about how he got back to all-star form on today's edition of Locked On Cavs.
You are Locked On Cavs, your daily Cleveland Cavaliers podcast.
Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, everybody? My name's Danny Cunningham. You might know me from my time covering the Cleveland Cavaliers, places like my new Substack, The Inside Shot, 92.3 The Fan, Cleveland Magazine, and a number of other stops along the way. Thank you for making today's edition of Locked On Cavs your first listen. Thank you for making the show your first listen every day. You can find the show anywhere you get your podcast, Apple, Spotify, anywhere else. Drop us a 5-star rating. Leave us a nice review. Be a friend. Tell a friend about the Locked On Cavs podcast. Make sure you're subscribed. Make sure they're subscribed as well. Also, we are available on YouTube. Just search Locked On Cavs on YouTube. If you're watching this video right now, do me a favor, hit that thumbs up button for me, click subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you don't miss the latest Locked On Cavs content. Proud part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's show, of course, is sponsored by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Also, Locked On Cavs now has a newsletter introducing the Locked On Cavs Daily Newsletter. It's your one-stop for ultimate team and league coverage delivered right to your inbox. Sign up for free now at LockedOnDaily.com. That's LockedOnDaily.com. And start your day with the all-new free Locked On Cavs newsletter. The Cleveland Cavaliers are 11-0 after they swept the weekend, beating the Golden State Warriors in blowout fashion on Friday night. Of course, they then turned around, played what I thought was probably their worst game of the year on Saturday as they defeated the Brooklyn Nets, had to come from behind in the fourth quarter. I thought there was some really good coaching adjustments that were made in that game. I do have podcasts up from this weekend talking about each of those two games in specific. I might get to some big picture thoughts from the weekend coming up a little bit later in the show, but I wanted to start today with Darius Garland, because I was on the Chase Down podcast earlier Sunday night with Carter, and Carter and Justin do a great job there. It definitely should be a show you're checking out if you're a Cavs fan. And one of the questions he asked me was, who's the best player on this Cavs team so far this season? And I don't think that there's a clear answer to that. I think that on different nights, it has been different guys. It hasn't always been Donovan Mitchell. I think sometimes it has been some Donovan Mitchell, but sometimes it's been Darius Garland. Sometimes it's been Evan Mobley. And the fact that there have been times where it has been Darius Garland has been one of the best things about this season for the Cavs, because Garland has gotten back to all-star form. Think back to what Darius looked like the year he was an all-star. And even to a lesser extent, I think back to what he looked like Donovan Mitchell's first year in Cleveland. So the 2022-2023 season, which I really think of as the start of this era of Cavs basketball. He obviously looked very different last year, was not the same guy as either of those seasons. Had a nightmare of a season. I've talked about it plenty of times. Don't need to rehash everything that went into it. But this year, so far, and it's only been 11 games, but I think Garland has returned to that all-star form. I think he's been phenomenal through the first few weeks of the season. And there are some things that I look at as sort of barometers for Darius as to how he's playing. And turnovers is certainly one of them, because I do think at Darius Garland's worst, he's been somebody that has not taken care of the basketball at a high enough level. And I think that is something he would say. I do believe he has said that in interviews before, that he has in the past thought he's needed to take care of the basketball, to do a better job of that. Well, this year so far, and part of the per game stats for Darius are a little bit skewed because he's playing the fewest minutes of his career, which partially is because I do think Kenny Atkinson wants to keep the minutes down for the starters compared to where they've been in previous years. Part of it is they've played 11 games, and 5 or 6 of those games have been blowout victories where starters have not had to play a ton of minutes, where he's been able to be around 25, 26, 27 minutes. And, those games just count a little bit more into averages when you have this small of a sample size, when you've only have 11 games to draw from. So I don't know that the per game stats are necessarily everything we should be looking at. The per 36 stats are probably where we should focus more of our attention. And right now, per 36 minutes, Darius Garland is having the best year of his career. If you look at those stats, he's averaging 25 points per 30 minutes, second on the team behind Donovan Mitchell. The most he's ever averaged was that first year with Donovan, where it was 21.9 points per 36 minutes. And the other number I look at is per 36 minutes, he's down to 3.2 turnovers. Last year, that was up at almost 4. That to me is a really big deal. He's taking care of the basketball more. There were too many instances last year where I would think he would go to the basket and didn't necessarily have a plan. Not to say that you can't adjust, or I guess not have a plan. He had a plan, but it was like a predetermined thing he was going to do. That sometimes he was going to drive and he was going to shoot no matter what because he had a mismatch. Other times he was going to drive and he was going to make a pass no matter what. And we would see Darius jump into the air and then not have an outlet, and it would lead to a turnover rather frequently. Not to say that it hasn't happened at all, because no one's perfect, and you're never going to erase that entirely from a guy who has a usage as high as Darius does. But I think that it's happened far less this year. I think that is one of the signs that Darius Garland is back to being Darius Garland. He's been so good taking care of the basketball. He's been so good setting others up, where he's averaging over 8 assists per 36 minutes. He's also obviously shot the basketball really well. But that is the one thing that, I don't think he's going to shoot almost 48% from three for an entire season. That would be bananas, especially on the volume of three-pointers that he's taking, where he's at a career high in terms of how many threes he's taking, not only per 36, but I believe per game too. So that is not going to keep up. That will come down at a certain point. But his shot selection, I think, has been really good. I think his shot selection, the threes that he's taking, more importantly, not passing up, have really been good looks. I don't look at what I've seen from Darius so far and say, wow, that three-pointer probably was a little too contested, not the best idea. I still think he's actually maybe passing out of too many of them. I think these numbers could be a little bit higher. But overall, he's been really, really good in that spot. And that is one of the things that we look at and say, okay, this is Darius Garland is Darius Garland again. He's not the guy that was playing for the Cavs last year wearing number 10. He's a much more aggressive, confident, free player. The style of basketball he's playing, it doesn't look like he has to do a ton of thinking. And I don't know that that was always true. And I think maybe thinking isn't the right way to put it. Maybe it's second guessing. I think if you watched him last year specifically, I think there were times where you could tell he was second guessing as he was going through things. I don't think that's happening anymore. The other thing about Darius's game that's been awesome, or one of the other things, I've got two more things I want to talk about, but what Darius Garland has done in clutch time for the Cavs this year has been fantastic. He's a big reason why they're 11-0, because of his performance down the stretch of the close games they've had. Now, of course, not every game they've played has been close, but so far in the clutch time minutes that the Cavs have had, and they've had 4 games that are considered clutch time. And clutch time is the game is within 5 points and 5 minutes or less is on the clock. So there have been 4 instances of that for the Cavs this year. Darius Garland has played 18 minutes of clutch time. He scored 24 points on 9 of 12 shooting, 3 of 5 from 3, 3 rebounds, 4 assists, and the Cavs have outscored their opponents by 26 points in that stretch. That is phenomenal basketball. That is why, right now, one of the best things the Cavs have going for them is when it comes down to, and think about the past couple of years, how this team really struggled to close out basketball games. And the first year they were together was like, they're still learning. And last year there really wasn't an excuse that they couldn't figure out late game offense. Now they've not only figured it out, they've excelled in it. Darius Garland being this version of him has been a big reason why they've excelled in it. And when Darius Garland is capable of this, it makes the Cavs so much more difficult to defend, because not only do teams have to worry about Donovan Mitchell, who is still the best player on this team, they have to worry about Darius Garland too. And I know this isn't part of the conversation, but they have to worry about Evan Mobley as well. I was talking to somebody before the game on Saturday night, and one of the things that they've seen, and this person watches a lot of basketball, one of the things that they've seen from the Cavs is that they have so many weapons offensively that have been put in position to be successful that it's made them so much more difficult to stop, not only throughout the game, but I think that has bled over into clutch time too. That has been something that we've seen to where their offense doesn't change. It doesn't slow down. They run their offense when it matters, and Darius Garland has been a big beneficiary of that. The one last thing I want to mention with Garland, I think he's playing defense at a really high level. I'm never going to confuse him with Gary Payton. He's never going to be a defensive player of the year guy. He's never going to be an all defense guy, but I think he's done well. And I looked to the Warriors game Friday night. Dean Wade was back. The Cavs kept Isaac Okoro in the starting lineup. My instant thinking was, they're keeping Isaac Okoro in the starting lineup so he can chase around Steph Curry, because that's not fun. That's a difficult thing to do. Isaac Okoro can handle that. Well, silly me, the game starts and Darius Garland's defending Steph Curry. That was a surprise to me, but I think it speaks to the challenge that Darius Garland has been willing to take on this season on both ends of the floor. And I think it's led to him having so far, and again, it is early. It has been 11 games, but I think it has been something that has led to this being so far the best season of his young career. Donovan Mitchell's been good for the Cavs. He hasn't been great for the Cavs, but there are some things that I look at and say, he's going to get better. He's got another gear to hit. The Cavs are going to need it at some point. We'll talk about what that gear is next right here on Locked On Cavs. Today's show is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. I've told you about FanDuel for a while because FanDuel is America's #1 sportsbook. And right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus if you win. Maybe you won NFL Sunday. And if you're a new customer, $5, got $150 in bonus bets. Or maybe you like the Cavs tonight against the Chicago Bulls. If you do, $5 on it, Cavs win, $150 in bonus bets coming your way. Or maybe during the game, because you're going to be watching the Cavs game on Monday night, there's something you see. It's like, you know what? Cavs might have, maybe they're trailing early and you're confident they're going to come back and win. You can place a live bet on there. And one of the best things that FanDuel does is when you're watching a game like that, you can go to their app for the latest live stats, live play-by-play, so much more. It's all in the FanDuel app. So just head on over to FanDuel.com today to join. That's FanDuel.com to join today. And you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com, FanDuel.com today. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Thank you again for making Locked On Cavs your first listen today and every day. You can find the show anywhere you get your podcasts, Apple, Spotify, anywhere else. Drop us a 5-star rating. Leave a nice review. Be a friend. Tell a friend about the Locked On Cavs podcast. Make sure you're subscribed. Make sure they're subscribed. Also available on YouTube. If you're watching this right now, hit that thumbs up button for me. Click subscribe and hit the notification bell so you don't miss the latest Locked On Cavs content. Donovan Mitchell so far for the Cavs, I think has been good. I don't think Donovan Mitchell has been great. And the fact that there's a couple of things that matter with this discussion, because Donovan Mitchell has been, since he's been in Cleveland, in my opinion, a top 10 player in the NBA. He finished 6th in MVP voting his first year. He was on track to be maybe not 6th, but near that point. I think last year he was going to be all NBA again last year. And he wasn't because he was injured. He missed too many games. He didn't hit that 55-game threshold. So that is what I think slowed him down a little bit, obviously. But this year, he hasn't been relied upon the same way that the Cavs have relied upon him in the past. And I think that's a good thing now and will be a good thing in the future for a couple of reasons. One, Donovan Mitchell doesn't need to work as hard. And that doesn't necessarily sound right. Obviously, he works incredibly hard. He doesn't need to work as hard on a game-to-game basis to get the Cavs victories because his teammates have been better. The offensive system has been better. And I think one of the things about Donovan so far this year, I think has taken a little bit of a step back and let his teammates do things, is This is building confidence and building trust in the rest of that locker room that things can get done offensively without the entire team needing to be strapped on board to Donovan Mitchell's back and letting him take them where they can go. That's what it's been in the past. That's not what it is right now. But Donovan Mitchell is still capable of that. And I think some of his underlying numbers show that because, yeah, his points per game a little bit down right now. Why is it a little bit down? Because instead of playing 35 minutes a game, the way Donovan Mitchell has played almost 36 minutes a game, which is what he's been since he's been in Cleveland, he's only playing 30 minutes a night. That is down. Donovan averaged a ton more points in previous years. He was at 28.3 his first year in Cleveland. He's at 26.6 last year. But as I mentioned, he's playing more minutes per 36 minutes. Donovan Mitchell is averaging 26.8 points per game. That's less than a point off of last year. That's less than 2 points off of his first year. That is partially because the Cavs have won so many games by virtue of blowout. I mentioned they only had 4 games this year with clutch time stats, where most of the other games have been decided in the fourth quarter. So his minutes are down. He also hasn't had to take over games. Yeah, of course, he had that huge bucket against Milwaukee that won them that game in Milwaukee, and that was great. But they haven't needed him to do that. Partially because Darius Garland has been able to, partially because they've been winning so many games. But you look at Donovan's shooting stats, he's shooting 40% from 3 right now, a career high. He's shooting 46% overall, which is a solid place to be. Still taking 9 3-pointers per 36 minutes, taking 20 shots per 36 minutes, right around where he's been. The Cavs just haven't needed him to do as much because he hasn't had to play as many minutes. Donovan is capable of being a guy that can take over games, of being an all-NBA player, of being a top 10 player in the NBA. The Cavs just haven't needed him to yet. But this team, as I mentioned on yesterday's show, this team is not going to go 82-0. Their goal is not to go 82-0. I promise you, at some point this year, the Cavs are not going to look as good as they look right now. They're going to hit a rough stretch. They're going to go through a stretch where they don't hit a ton of shots. They're going to go through a stretch where winning gets hard. When that stretch gets there, you know what they're going to need? They're going to need Donovan Mitchell to step up and do that. And Donovan Mitchell is going to be capable of it. And I think he's going to be more capable of it because he's not having to overexert himself for the Cavs just to win games in October and November. He's able to play within the flow of the basketball game, and the Cavs are blowing teams out. And ultimately, when this team does get to the playoffs, which I don't think is a question at this point, and goes deep into the playoffs, which I think should be expected at this point, that's when they're going to need Donovan Mitchell to, at times, put on the cape and be a superhero. And the less that he has to do that during the regular season, the better he'll be able to be during the playoffs. I don't think we realize how much of a difference playing, and I don't expect him to play as few minutes as he's playing right now for the full season. Like, I expect that number to go up probably to around 32. If I had to bet, he'll finish the year around 32 minutes a game. So just for rounding purposes, let's say he's played 36 the last 2 years. Those 4 less minutes per game will add up over the course of the season. And I think that we will see the best version of Donovan Mitchell that we've seen in a Cavs uniform when we get to this postseason. And that is something that I do think should be exciting for Cavs fans, because just because he hasn't had to do it yet doesn't mean he won't need to. He will. There's going to be stretches in the regular season. There are going to be stretches in the postseason where Donovan Mitchell needs to be a superstar. And there's no reason to believe that Donovan Mitchell won't be a superstar in those moments. His underlying numbers look really good. His per game stuff is a little bit down because the Cavs haven't needed him. And honestly, I think that's the best place you can be right now if you're the Cavs. Because not only is it saving Donovan a little bit and making the load he has to carry less, it's also building up the rest of this roster. To now, you're seeing Evan Mobley do more. You're seeing Darius Garland be an all-star again. Those guys doing that ultimately puts this team in the absolute best position they can be in And it helps when Donovan Mitchell needs to be that guy again at the end of games in fourth quarters in the playoffs in big spots. It's going to be easier for him to do that because he's got the help around him that I'm not so sure he had in the same capacity before. And he should be fresher. And those are things that have been really, I think, hidden bonuses of the Cavs 11-0 start. Cavs have 4 games this week. I want to spend about a minute talking about all of them because there's a showdown next week with the Boston Celtics. The Cavs could be still an unbeaten team going into Boston on November 19th. Let's talk about the week ahead next, right here on Locked On Cavs. Today's episode of Locked On Cavs is brought to you by Game Time. Game Time is my go-to ticket marketplace. It should be your go-to ticket marketplace. Whenever I want to go to a basketball game, which of course, I have a credential for, so I don't go get tickets for this, but baseball games, I go to Guardians games all the time when they're in season. Game Time is the place I go. A Cleveland Browns game, if that's your thing, Game Time has you covered. Concerts, so much more. Game Time is the place to go. I'm actually thinking about going to a college football game next weekend. You know what app I've been using to look at tickets? Game Time. Of course I've been using Game Time. And I like Game Time because they've got the all-in pricing option. Toggle that thing on and you don't have to worry about taxes and fees at the last minute. I'm the type of person, I don't want to be surprised with those fees as I go to check out. I want to know what I'm paying up front. I want to know what to expect. I want clarity throughout the entire process. Well, Game Time provides that clarity. They take the guesswork out of the entire experience. And another way they do that is by showing you what your view of the field or the stage or the court, whatever it may be, whatever event you're going to, they'll show you what your view is going to look like from the seats you're going to buy. Game Time has that feature inside the app. It's a feature I use all the time. It's something that makes my ticket buying experience better. So what you need to do, if you want to go to an event, if you want to go to a game, you need to take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. So download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms do apply. Again, create an account, redeem code LOCKEDONNBA. That's LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Download Game Time today. What time is it? It's game time. Thank you again for making Locked On Cavs your first listen today and every day. You can find the show anywhere you get your podcast, Apple, Spotify, anywhere else. Drop us a 5-star rating. Leave us a nice review. Be a friend. Tell a friend about the Locked On Cavs podcast. Also available on YouTube. If you're watching this video right now, do me a favor, hit that thumbs up button for me, click subscribe, and hit the notification so you don't miss the latest Locked On Cavs content. The Cavs this week, they've got 4 games. Not going to have a whip around episode this week. I know a lot of people have liked it. I've really enjoyed doing them. Just with the Cavs playing twice this weekend, I didn't have time to record that, put it together. That will be back next Monday, I promise. I just did not have the time to do it this week. So I'm going to spend a couple of minutes here talking about the Cavs opponents, but they play the Chicago Bulls tonight. It's the first of 2 matchups with the Chicago Bulls. One of the things this week, obviously they play the Bulls 4 times throughout the year. The Bulls have been solid this year. They've not been great. They've not been terrible. They have been solid. I think they've been a little bit better than I expected them to be. I thought they'd be a team that was sort of in the tanking for Cooper Flag area, and maybe they could be. The Bulls could look much different if they trade guys like Nikola Vucevic, if they trade Zach LaVine. They could look like a different roster in a couple of months. That's entirely possible. But so far on the year, the Bulls are 4-6 as I record this Sunday night. They have struggled against good teams. They're 1-3 against teams that are over 500. They're 3-3 against teams that are below 500. The one thing that has stood out to me about Chicago is they've played so much faster than we're used to seeing the Bulls play. They are, I believe, number 1 in the league in pace. That might change after Sunday's results. I don't know. But as I record this, they're number 1 in pace in the NBA. So that's going to make this game on Monday and the game on Friday look so much different than the game the Cavs played against Brooklyn on Saturday night, where Brooklyn was the 29th team in pace. The Bulls are first. So I do think Monday's game is going to stylistically look much closer to what the Cavaliers want to play. Wednesday night, the Cavs have Philadelphia. The Sixers, have not been good. They did get a win tonight, though. They beat Charlotte, which I'll talk about coming up in a second. This game against Philly, I don't think is going to be the game that we all wish it would be. I would like to see Philly give the Cavs a real test, but Tyrese Maxey's out. He's got a hamstring injury. It's supposed to be week to week. It would be about 1 week since he injured it when the Cavs play on Wednesday night against Philly. I can't imagine he's going to be back for that, though. And Joel Embiid is returning from a 3-game suspension for the Sixers on Tuesday night. The Cavs play the Sixers on Wednesday. What does that mean? Well, Joel Embiid really doesn't play in back-to-backs. I can't imagine his first 2 games of the year are going to come on back-to-back days. I would imagine the Cavs are taking on a Sixers team that does not have Joel Embiid, does not have Tyrese Maxey, and might not have Paul George playing as well. I think this Sixers team that they see on Wednesday night is going to be very, very different than what we expect the Sixers to be, or what we expect the Sixers to be at the end of the year. So I do think that game is not one that is as exciting as it sounds when you hear Cavs Sixers. I think it's better in theory, unfortunately, than it will be in actuality. And then the Cavs play Chicago again. Just talked about them. That's Friday night at home. That is the Cavs' first NBA Cup game of the year. I think the NBA Cup is something the Cavs should strive to win. We will be talking about a big NBA Cup matchup next week on the show, but I think that is something they should really strive for. I think the Cavs should get up for Friday's game against the Bulls, and then Sunday they take on the Charlotte Hornets, who I think are relatively similar to the Bulls in terms of they've beaten the not great teams they've played, and they've struggled against the teams they've played that have been good. Their record against teams that are currently above 500 is below 500, as the Hornets, as I record this, sit at 4-6. I'm not sure if that updated after they lost to Philly, though, but they are 2-3 against teams that are 500 and above, 2-3 against teams that are 500 and below. So the Hornets are okay. I think they're a very average basketball team. I don't think they're great. I don't think they're terrible. Stylistically, I think this game is going to be one that the Cavs should be able to handle. Charlotte won't play as slow as Brooklyn, but I don't expect it to be a track meet type of game the way I expect Monday and Friday's games to be. But thank you for making Locked On Cavs your first listen today and every day. You can find the show anywhere you get your podcasts, Apple, Spotify, anywhere else. Be a friend. Tell a friend about the Locked On Cavs podcast. Make sure you are subscribed. Make sure a friend is subscribed for me. Let's grow this thing as big as we can make it. Also, if you're watching the video on YouTube, just search Locked On Cavs on YouTube right now. If you're watching the video, hit that thumbs up button for me. Click subscribe and hit the notification bell so you don't miss the latest Locked On Cavs content. I will be back tomorrow talking about maybe win number 12 over the Bulls.